On June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious invasion in human history unfolded along the beaches of Normandy. While countless accounts exist from the Allied perspective, far fewer survive from the German defenders who faced the incoming tide of liberation. Today, we examine one such rare document, the memoir of Heinrich Novak, a German machine gunner who manned position WN-72, Widerstands Nest 72, Resistance Nest 72, overlooking Omaha Beach. Novak's account provides a chilling counterpoint to the heroic narratives of D-Day. Through his MG-42's sights, we witness the Allied landing from the perspective of those tasked with stopping it. His memoir, written years after the war, offers unflinching detail about the mechanical act of killing on an industrial scale, while also revealing the complex emotions of a soldier caught between duty and humanity. Setting the stage, Omaha Beach. Before delving into Novak's personal account, we must understand the killing ground that was Omaha Beach. 6 miles of gently curving sand stretch between the villages of Vierville-sur-Mer and Colleville-sur-Mer. The Allied planners divided this expanse into 8 sectors, each assigned code names that would become synonymous with sacrifice. Charlie, Dog Green, Dog White, Dog Red, Easy Green, Easy Red, Fox Green, and Fox Red. The beach itself presented a defender's dream and an attacker's nightmare. At low tide, 300 yards of sand separated the water's edge from the shingle, a bank of smooth stones that marked the high tide line. Beyond the shingle rose bluffs between 100 and 170 feet high, dominating the beach with near vertical slopes. Only 5 draws, natural valleys, provided exits from the beach, and the Germans had turned each into a kill zone. The defenses were formidable. General Erwin Rommel, charged with fortifying the Atlantic Wall, had overseen the placement of thousands of obstacles. Belgian gates, massive steel frames designed to rip open landing craft, hedgehogs, crossed steel beams that could pierce hulls, tetrahedrons, concrete pyramids to block tank movement, wooden stakes, angled posts topped with mines, concertina wire, coiled razor wire in triple rows. These obstacles forced landing craft to approach at high tide when the beach offered minimal cover, or at low tide when troops faced hundreds of yards of open sand. Above this killing field, the Germans had constructed 85 machine gun positions, 35 pillboxes, 8 concrete gun casemates, 4 field artillery positions, and 18 anti-tank gun positions. Each strong point was designated with the prefix WN Widerstands Nest, creating an interlocking network of fire that could sweep every inch of beach. The defender, Heinrich Novak. Heinrich Novak served in the 716th Static Infantry Division, a unit composed largely of older men, foreign volunteers, and soldiers recovering from wounds suffered on the Eastern Front. Unlike the elite units stationed inland, the 716th was considered a second-line formation, equipped with captured weapons and manned by troops deemed unfit for mobile warfare. Novak himself was a veteran of the Eastern Front, where he had served as a machine gunner during the brutal fighting of 1942-43. Wounded at Kharkov, he was transferred to France for recuperation and garrison duty, a common practice that inadvertently concentrated experienced combat veterans in the Atlantic Wall defenses. His father had served as a machine gunner during World War I, surviving the apocalyptic Battle of the Somme in 1916. This family military tradition would weigh heavily on Novak as he faced his own trial by fire on June 6, 1944. WN-72, the killing position. Novak's position, WN-72, occupied a commanding position on the bluffs between the Vierville and Les Moulins draws. The strong point consisted of 2 concrete machine gun bunkers with interlocking fields of fire, 1 observation post with armored cupola, multiple open machine gun positions, underground personnel shelters connected by trenches, ammunition bunkers storing thousands of rounds, communication trenches linking to neighboring positions. The pride of WN-72 was its 2 MG-42 machine guns, known as Hitler's buzzsaw for its distinctive sound. The MG-42 could fire shown 200 rounds per minute, 20 bullets per second. Its effective range exceeded 1,000 meters, allowing gunners to engage targets far out on the beach. Each gun was pre-sighted on specific kill zones, with range cards marking distances to landmarks. Supporting WN-72 were 3 88mm guns in concrete casemates, positioned to fire in enfilade along the beach. These dual-purpose weapons could engage both landing craft and tanks with deadly accuracy. Their crews had spent months practicing, turning the beach into a precisely calibrated shooting gallery. The longest day begins. Novak's account opens in the pre-dawn darkness of June 6th. The air bombardment caused us no serious problems, but the bombardment from the sea destroyed the machine gun positions located a few hundred meters from WN-72, and was quite shocking for me and my comrades. The Allied preparatory bombardment began at 05:50 hours, with battleships, cruisers, and destroyers pounding the beach defenses. USS Texas, USS Nevada, HMS Warspite, and other capital ships hurled thousands of shells at the German positions. B-24 Liberator heavy bombers followed, intended to crater the beach and destroy strongpoints. Yet the bombardment largely failed. The naval shells, fired from miles offshore in rough seas, struggled to hit the small, hardened targets on the bluffs. The bombers, flying through heavy cloud cover and fearing hitting their own troops, released their loads too late. Most bombs fell harmlessly behind the German positions, leaving the beach defenses intact. Novak describes the psychological impact. One of us, mentally broken, jumped out of the entrenchment and died, cut down by shrapnel. Even hardened Eastern Front veterans could break under such bombardment. The concussion waves, the earth shaking, the deafening noise, all combined to create a hellish sensory overload. As the barrage lifted, Novak and his surviving comrades knew what it meant. We realized the halt of the shelling meant that the landing would begin any moment now. First contact, I placed my MG-42 in the loophole and recalled how my father had told me numerous times that he had been forced to do so when he used to be a machine gunner in the Battle of the Somme during World War I. This generational echo, father and son, separated by 30 years but united in the terrible mechanics of machine gun warfare, adds poignancy to Novak's account. Both men had found themselves behind automatic weapons, tasked with stopping massed infantry attacks across open ground. Through his position's embrasure, Novak watched the invasion fleet materialized through the morning mist. There were a lot of boats. About a dozen of them were approaching me, cutting through the waves. They seemed to be about 1 kilometer from our position, but we could see, along the whole stretch of beach, that there were many more of them coming up behind them. We saw some small warships of all types. The sea was totally swamped by this huge flock. The first wave targeting Omaha Beach consisted of 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Infantry Division, National Guard units from Virginia and Maryland, 16th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, Regular Army, 741st and 743rd Tank Battalions, D.D. Sherman amphibious tanks, Engineer Special Brigades tasked with clearing obstacles. These men, packed into Higgins boats, LCVPs, and larger landing craft, LCAs and LCIs, approached shore in precise formations practiced countless times in England. Each boat carried approximately 30 soldiers, organized by squads and platoons according to detailed landing tables. The killing begins. What was I thinking when I saw them approaching us? Frankly, I do not recall any clear thoughts or feelings in my mind except my worry about whether my machine gun had been damaged by the shelling. This emotional numbness, this reduction to mechanical concerns, speaks to the psychological armor soldiers develop in combat. Faced with the enormity of what was about to happen, Novak's mind focused on the immediate and controllable, the function of his weapon. The 88mm guns opened first. The crews of these guns were very accurate in firing and hit the bow section of one of the landing boats. It was a high explosive projectile. It went through and detonated inside the boat. Its ramp flew up into the air, and I saw many men inside who had been wounded. The Higgins boats, designed for speed and shallow draft, offered no protection against artillery. Their plywood hulls and thin metal ramps might as well have been paper against 88mm shells. When hit, they became death traps. Men weighted down with 60 to 80 pounds of equipment struggled to escape as water rushed in. These scenes continued all along the beach as shells hit these boats, and on some occasions they simply caught on fire. The DD duplex drive Sherman tanks of the 741st Tank Battalion suffered even worse. Launched 6,000 yards from shore in rough seas, 27 of 29 tanks sank, taking their crews with them. The canvas skirts that provided flotation proved wholly inadequate for the conditions. Into the killing zone. As the landing craft reached the outer obstacles, they lowered their ramps. The men who were inside them had begun to step out of them and get into the water. They weren't rushing. It was all happening in an orderly, very organized manner. The boats were stopping where the water reached people's chest or neck. This description captures the terrible irony of military discipline. The very training that made soldiers effective, following orders, maintaining formation, trusting the plan, now led them methodically into a killing zone. Company A of the 116th Infantry, landing at Dog Green, directly below W-72, would cease to exist as a fighting unit within minutes. So the first lines of these guys wandered toward me. That's the only word suitable for the situation. They moved in a slow and orderly manner. The waves were up to their chests or waists. Now it was just at that moment that we opened fire as ordered. They were about 400 meters away from us. The MG-42's cyclic rate meant that pulling the trigger for 1 second sent 20 bullets downrange. At 400 meters, point-blank range for a machine gun, accuracy was almost guaranteed. The gun's beaten zone, the elliptical area where bullets would strike, measured approximately 2 meters wide by 50 meters deep at that range. At first, I did not aim individually at anyone, but led the barrel of the machine gun from left to right along the beach. This way, I had several men cut down in each line. This technique, called traversing fire, maximized casualties by sweeping the gun across the target area. Combined with the MG-42's rate of fire, it created a continuous stream of death across the beach. You must remember that the MG-42 was a weapon of such powerful force that its bullets would frequently go through the human body and hit everything that was behind it. The 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser rounds fired by the MG-42 retained lethal velocity even after passing through a human body. This overpenetration meant that men seeking cover behind their comrades found no safety. Bullets passed through multiple soldiers before finally stopping. Massacre in the shallows. The Americans tried to weather it all. Some of them tried to make it to the shore faster. They were still advancing pretty slowly, and because of this and the short distance away from me, they seemed to be easy targets. The weight of waterlogged equipment, the resistance of chest-deep water, the obstacles, and the shock of seeing comrades cut down all combined to slow movement to a crawl. Men who had trained to rush across beaches found themselves barely able to walk. On several occasions, they tried to remain in the water where it was neck-deep, probably in the hope that they would be less noticeable that way. Some soldiers, recognizing the futility of advancing, sought survival in immobility. But the MG-42's position on the bluffs gave Novak a clear view of the entire beach. There was no dead ground, no defilade, no escape from the searching fire. In other cases, the men tried to shelter themselves behind anti-tank hedgehogs or obstacles, but they were far too narrow to provide a man with any defense, and they got hit by our bullets. The very obstacles meant to stop tanks now became death traps for infantry. Men huddled behind the steel beams, presenting stationary targets for German gunners who had pre-registered these positions. The other guys I saw were dropping their knapsacks and equipment and running out onto the sand, attempting to cross the beach and get to the breakwater. Of course, I gave them special attention and tried to ensure that none of them passed more than a few steps. This represents the breakdown of tactical cohesion. Soldiers abandoned their equipment, ammunition, explosives, radios, medical supplies, in desperate attempts to reach cover. But the 200 to 300 yards of open beach offered no concealment. Running only made them more conspicuous targets. The human cost. Frankly, I have no idea for sure how many people I killed. What I can say is that the shallow waters just in front of us were full of bodies, no fewer than 100 of them. This kind of number was typical of the entire beach in front of the other firing positions. This clinical accounting masks enormous tragedy. Each body represented a universe of experience ended, families destroyed, futures erased. Company A, 116th Infantry, 230 men, suffered over 90% casualties in the first minutes. Only a handful reached the seawall alive. The incoming tide was beginning to run, and these bodies were rolling over and bobbing on the waves, and helmets and rifles and other equipment were floating in the water with them. The rising tide added a macabre element to the scene. Bodies became obstacles for following waves of troops. Men had to push past floating corpses of comrades to reach the beach. The water turned red with blood. I found myself feeling bad for these guys. After the initial burst of energy and determination I experienced as the attack began. Here, Novak reveals the complex psychology of combat. The initial adrenaline rush, the focus on technical execution, gradually gave way to human recognition. These weren't abstract targets, but men like himself, following orders, doing their duty. Echoes of the Somme. My number 2 was not indifferent to this. He shook his head and said that it was not right for Americans to have their men sacrificed in this way. The parallel to World War I becomes explicit. On July 1st, 1916, British forces suffered 60,000 casualties in a single day, attacking German positions on the Somme. Machine gunners had swept away wave after wave of infantry crossing no man's land. My father was on the Somme during World War I. He used to tell me that on the Somme, the German machine gunners were yelling at the advancing British to get back and save their lives. This remarkable detail, machine gunners attempting to warn their enemies, speaks to the horror of industrialized killing. Even hardened soldiers recoiled from the mechanical slaughter their weapons enabled. There was no such communication between ours and the Americans here. In any case, I have not heard of it. The impersonal nature of the Normandy battle, greater distances, no shared language, the deafening noise, prevented even this small mercy. The killing continued as an abstract exercise. Technical realities. We only stopped firing when the barrel of our MGs would start to overheat and cause misfires. We did not want our guns to fail, so we put them down and let them cool down. The MG-42's phenomenal rate of fire came with a cost. Sustained firing heated barrels to the point where rounds could cook off, fire spontaneously from heat alone. Crews carried spare barrels and asbestos gloves for quick changes, but the process took precious seconds. Then we would pick up our rifles and shoot with them. This would mean that our hands and heads would be above the barrier, and it was only at this point that I noticed the first bullets flying at us. Only when forced to expose themselves did the German defenders face return fire. The geometric advantage of elevation, combined with concrete protection, made German casualties minimal during the initial assault. Some of the Americans sheltered in or behind these bumps and fired at us on a sporadic basis. Gradually, survivors began returning fire. Men who reached the seawall or shell craters could engage the German positions, though at extreme disadvantage. Rifle fire against concrete embrasures rarely succeeded. The tide turns, literally. In the meantime, the tide was running at full force so that the sand had less and less space. This meant that the soldiers arriving on the beach had almost no space at all to seek cover. So the carnage restarted. The rising tide compressed the battlefield. Later waves of troops found no beach, only water meeting the seawall, bodies floating in the surf, and German fire sweeping every inch of remaining sand. Landing craft had to discharge directly into the killing zone. The second and third waves faced an impossible situation. The beach obstacles, meant to be cleared by now, remained intact. Engineers tasked with demolition had been killed or pinned down. Landing craft struck mines and obstacles, adding to the carnage. Analysis: the mechanics of slaughter. Novak's account, while brief, illuminates several key aspects of the Omaha Beach assault that often get lost in heroic narratives. Technological mismatch. The MG-42 represented the pinnacle of machine gun design. Its 200 round-per-minute rate of fire dwarfed the 450 to 600 rounds per minute of American .30 caliber machine guns. One MG-42 could dominate hundreds of yards of beach, especially when firing from protected positions with pre-registered ranges. Against this, American infantry had M1 Garand rifles, excellent weapons, but semi-automatic fire couldn't suppress emplaced machine guns. Bayard automatic rifles, 20-round magazines, limited, sustained fire. Mortars and bazookas, mostly lost in the surf or with killed crews. Hand grenades, useless at the ranges involved. The technological equation heavily favored the defenders. Geography as force multiplier. WN-72's position on the bluffs provided what military theorists call plunging fire. Shots angled downward that made cover ineffective. Even men lying prone presented their backs to gunners above. The concave curve of Omaha Beach meant German positions could deliver enfilade fire, shooting along the length of formations rather than just their front. The beach itself offered no cover. Unlike the popular image of D-Day, featuring soldiers using obstacles for protection, Novak reveals these provided no real shelter. The steel beams were too narrow, the spacing too wide. Men died trying to hide behind obstacles that German gunners had already registered as aiming points. Doctrine meets reality. American assault doctrine emphasized speed and violence of action. Get off the beach quickly, overwhelm defenses with concentrated firepower. But doctrine assumed either successful preliminary bombardment or at least achievable objectives. At Omaha, neither condition existed. The soldiers training to maintain formation and follow orders became a liability. Novak describes them advancing in an orderly manner, even as comrades fell around them. Initiative and adaptation scatter, seek whatever minimal cover exists, return fire. Took time to override training that emphasized cohesion and momentum. The psychology of killing. Novak's emotional journey through the battle deserves careful analysis. He begins focused purely on technical concerns. Is his weapon functioning? He then enters what Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman calls the mechanical phase, traversing fire without aiming at individuals, focusing on weapon manipulation rather than human targets. Only later does emotional recognition intrude. I found myself feeling bad for these guys. This progression, technical focus, mechanical execution, eventual human recognition, appears consistently in accounts from automatic weapons gunners. The very efficiency of the weapon creates psychological distance until the cumulative horror breaks through. His assistant gunners comment, "It was not right for Americans to have their men sacrificed this way," reveals another psychological defense. Blame shifts to enemy leadership for sending men into hopeless situations, allowing the gunner to see himself as merely the instrument of others' poor decisions. The absent enemy. Remarkably, Novak barely mentions American return fire until late in his account. It was only at this point that I noticed the first bullets flying at us. This absence speaks volumes about the one-sided nature of the initial assault. American infantry doctrine emphasized fire and maneuver, one element suppressing while another advanced. But suppression requires hitting, or at least threatening, enemy positions. Rifles against concrete bunkers at 400-plus yards achieved neither. The geometric advantage of elevation meant Americans couldn't even see the gun ports killing them. Breaking the defense. Though Novak's account ends before the American breakthrough, understanding how Omaha's defenses finally fell provides essential context. Naval gunfire support destroyers, seeing the slaughter on the beach, closed to dangerous ranges, some within 1,000 yards of shore, to provide direct fire support. USS McCook, USS Carmack, and USS Doyle particularly distinguished themselves, systematically destroying German strongpoints despite risk of grounding or mine damage. These destroyers used flat trajectory fire, sending 5-inch shells directly into gun embrasures. Unlike the earlier area bombardment, this precision fire could actually hit the small targets of individual bunkers. Individual initiative. Small groups of survivors, often led by junior officers or NCOs, began infiltrating the bluffs. They discovered that the impassable slopes could be climbed where brush provided concealment. Dead ground, areas invisible from German positions, existed in folds and draws. Company C, 2nd Rangers, led by Lieutenant Colonel James Rudder, who had led the assault on Pointe du Hoc, reached the bluff top near WN 70. Small groups from the 16th Infantry found paths between strong points. These infiltrations forced German defenders to split their attention between the beach and threats from flanks and rear. Ammunition depletion. Novak mentions letting his gun cool between bursts, but ammunition posed another constraint. Each MG-42 position typically had 10,000, 15,000 rounds available, seemingly inexhaustible. But at 1,200 rounds per minute, sustained firing consumed ammunition rapidly. German doctrine called for 250-round belts to be fired in 5 to 7 round bursts to conserve barrels and ammunition. The target-rich environment of D-Day made such restraint difficult. By late morning, many positions faced ammunition shortages. Breakdown of defense coordination. The German defense relied on interlocking fields of fire and communication between strong points. As positions fell or were isolated, this coordination collapsed. WN 72 could no longer count on supporting fire from neighboring positions. Artillery observers died or lost communication. The defense became a series of isolated actions rather than coordinated resistance. The broader context. German forces at Omaha. The 352nd Infantry Division, not identified by Allied intelligence, reinforced the 716th Static Division at Omaha Beach. This veteran unit from the Eastern Front significantly strengthened defenses. Its presence meant defenders had both the experience and numbers to maximize their advantages. German strength at Omaha totaled approximately 7,800 troops in beach defenses and immediate reserves, 60 artillery pieces of various calibers, 85 machine gun positions, 35 pillboxes and bunkers, multiple mortar positions, and anti-tank guns. Against this, the initial American assault waves numbered roughly 34,000 troops, though only the first waves faced the full weight of prepared defenses. Casualties and consequences. American casualties at Omaha Beach on D-Day numbered approximately 2,400 killed, wounded, or missing. Estimates vary. Highest losses in 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions. Some units suffered 90% plus casualties. Company A, 116th Infantry. Total Allied D-Day casualties, out in 10,000 pound across all beaches. German casualties at Omaha remain uncertain, but likely numbered. 1,200 to 1,500 killed, wounded, or captured. Most strong points fought until overrun. Few reserves available to counterattack. These numbers reveal the battle's asymmetry. Despite eventual American victory, the casualty ratio during the initial assault favored defenders dramatically, perhaps 10-1 or higher in the first hours. Why Omaha nearly failed. Several factors almost turned Omaha into disaster. Intelligence. Failure. The 352nd Infantry Division's presence surprised Allied planners. Bombardment. Failure. Cloud cover and fear of friendly fire rendered preliminary bombardment ineffective. DD tank losses. Rough seas sank most amphibious tanks, eliminating crucial direct fire support. Geographic challenges. Omaha's terrain favored defenders more than any other D-Day beach tactical inflexibility. Initial waves followed plans even as situations demanded adaptation. Only individual courage, naval gunfire support, and German ammunition/communication failures prevented complete catastrophe. Historical significance. Moral complexity. Novak's account forces uncomfortable recognition. German defenders at Normandy fought skillfully and bravely. This complicates simple good versus evil narratives. The machine gunner following orders, defending his position, feeling sympathy for his victims. How do we judge such men? Unlike the Eastern Front, where German forces participated in genocidal warfare, the Normandy defenders fought a conventional military action. Many, like Novak, were Eastern Front veterans, transferred west after wounds. They fought for survival and comrades rather than ideology. This doesn't excuse service to Nazi Germany, but demands nuanced understanding. The young men in Feldgrau uniforms manning the Atlantic Wall were simultaneously instruments of evil regime and human beings caught in history's machinery. Tactical lessons. Military professionals study Omaha Beach for timeless lessons. Prepared defenses matter. Well-sighted automatic weapons in protected positions can stop much larger forces, especially when geography favors defenders. Suppression is paramount. Attacking forces must suppress defenders or face prohibitive casualties. When suppression fails, as at Omaha's opening, slaughter results. Combined arms, essential. Infantry alone, regardless of courage, cannot overcome integrated defenses. Artillery, armor, air support, and naval gunfire must coordinate. Flexibility beats planning. Rigid adherence to plans despite changed circumstances courts disaster. Junior leader initiative saved the day at Omaha. Logistics still rule. German ammunition shortages contributed to defensive collapse. American ammunition, waterproofing, and medical planning saved lives despite losses. Technological evolution. The Omaha Beach battle highlighted automatic weapons dominance over exposed infantry. This lesson drove post-war developments, increased emphasis on suppressive fire in infantry doctrine, development of infantry fighting vehicles, providing protected mobility, integration of direct fire support at lower tactical levels, recognition that prepared defenses require specialized assault techniques. Modern military forces study Omaha to understand urban combat, where defenders again enjoy similar advantages of cover, concealment, and restricted enemy movement. Memory and memorialization. Omaha Beach remains the most visited D-Day site, its cemetery holding 9,387 American dead. The German cemetery at Lacombe contains 21,222 graves. These numbers represent individual tragedies on both sides. Novak's account humanizes German defenders, typically portrayed as faceless enemies. This complicates but enriches historical understanding. Recognizing opponent humanity doesn't diminish Allied sacrifice, but contextualizes the mutual tragedy of young men killing each other for causes determined by distant leaders. The human element, individual versus industrial warfare. Novak's MG-42 epitomized industrial warfare, mass-produced death delivered impersonally at distance. Yet, his account reveals persistent humanity. He worried about his weapon, but also felt bad for these guys. His assistant openly questioned the morality of the slaughter. This tension, industrial killing versus human recognition, defines modern warfare. Technology enables killing at ever greater distances and scales, yet the killers remain human beings with consciences, families, doubts. Novak couldn't fully reduce his targets to abstractions despite the mechanical interface of his weapon. Generational echoes. The parallel between Novak's father at the Somme and Novak at Omaha provides powerful historical resonance. Both generations discovered warfare's industrial horror, the machine gun's ability to render courage irrelevant, to reduce human waves to windrows of corpses. Yet key differences existed. The Somme's machine gunners could sometimes warn attackers, sharing language and close proximity. At Omaha, greater distances and language barriers prevented even this minimal humanity. War had become more impersonal even as its lethality increased. The burden of memory. Writing years later, Novak faced the burden of memory, how to convey his experience honestly while living with its weight. His clinical tone, counting bodies, describing technical details, suggests emotional distancing. Yet moments of recognition break through. I've found myself feeling bad for these guys. Combat veterans often struggle with similar tensions. How to honor their service while acknowledging war's horror. How to remember comrades while recognizing shared humanity with former enemies. Novak's sparse account hints at these deeper conflicts. Lessons for today. The persistence of geography. Despite technological advances, geography remains paramount in warfare. Omaha Beach's bluffs provided advantages no technology could negate: elevation, observation, protected positions. Modern conflicts in Afghanistan, with its mountains and valleys, echo similar dynamics. Future conflicts will still see geography channel forces into kill zones, high ground dominating low, restricted terrain, favoring defenders. Technology changes warfare's character, but not its fundamental nature. The human factor, Novak's emotional journey from mechanical killing to human recognition, reflects timeless psychological patterns. Modern drone operators report similar experiences, despite even greater physical and emotional distance from targets. The human psyche resists reducing other humans to mere targets, regardless of technological interfaces. Training and conditioning can delay this recognition, but rarely eliminate it. Post-traumatic stress often stems from this tension between duty and humanity, between survival instincts and moral intuitions. Prepared defenses in modern context. Urban warfare in places like Fallujah, Mosul, or Mariupol demonstrates that prepared defenses still exact terrible tolls on attackers. Buildings replace bunkers, IEDs substitute for pre-registered artillery, but the dynamics remain similar. Defenders with local knowledge and protected positions versus attackers crossing open areas. Understanding Omaha Beach helps military planners recognize these patterns and develop counters. Combined arms integration, extensive reconnaissance, flexible tactics, robust logistics. History doesn't repeat precisely, but rhymes sufficiently for lessons to transfer. Conclusion: Voices from the Bluffs. Heinrich Novak's brief account opens windows into D-Day's darkest chapter while raising uncomfortable questions about war, duty, and humanity. Through his MG-42 sights, we see American soldiers not as heroic liberators, but as targets in a killing field. This perspective doesn't diminish their sacrifice, but adds dimension to historical understanding. The young German machine gunner, following orders, manning his position, feeling sympathy for his victims while continuing to kill them, he embodies war's moral complexity. Neither monster nor hero, he was a soldier, caught in history's machinery, playing his assigned role in a drama whose script was written far from Omaha Beach. His account reminds us that behind every casualty statistic lie individual stories: the American soldier who never made it past the waterline, the German defender who broke under bombardment, the survivors who carried physical and psychological wounds for decades. Each represents a universe of experience, hope, and potential, altered or ended by a few terrible hours on a French beach. The MG-42 that Novak served still exists in modified form, the MG-3 in modern armies, testament to its deadly efficiency. But no technology can eliminate war's essential truth, that it remains organized murder, however necessary or justified. Novak's father learned this at the Somme, Novak at Omaha. Future generations will discover it anew unless we learn from their experiences. Perhaps that's the ultimate value of accounts like Novak's, not to glorify combat or justify causes, but to reveal war's reality so starkly that we exhaust every alternative before accepting its necessity. The view from WN-72 on June 6, 1944, shows what happens when diplomacy fails, when ideologies clash, when young men become instruments of others' ambitions. In the end, Novak's memoir stands as both historical document and moral warning. Yes, the German defenses at Omaha Beach performed with terrible efficiency. Yes, American forces ultimately prevailed through courage and sacrifice. But The deeper truth transcends national narratives. War reduces human beings to targets and shooters, corpses and survivors, statistics and memories. The machine gun that Novak's father served in 1916 and that Novak himself served in 1944 represents continuity in mankind's ability to destroy itself efficiently. Each generation rediscovers war's horror, usually after forgetting previous lessons. Novak's account, preserved across decades, offers one more chance to learn without repeating the experience. Standing today on Omaha Beach, visitors struggle to reconcile its peaceful beauty with June 6, 1944's horror. The bunkers remain, converted to monuments. Markers show where units landed and died. The cemetery's crosses and stars stretch in perfect rows, imposing order on chaos retrospectively. But perhaps Novak's brief clinical account better captures the day's essence. The mechanical traverse of machine gun fire across crowded water, bodies rolling in surf, young men following orders into death. No heroic narrative, no national glory, just industrial killing conducted by ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. That's war's reality, whether viewed from landing craft or machine gun nest, whether justified by liberation or defense. Novak pulled his trigger. Americans fell. Americans pressed forward. Germans died. Both sides did their duty as they understood it. Both sides suffered. In the end, enough Americans survived to break the defense, but at costs that still stagger imagination. Heinrich Novak's few paragraphs thus join the chorus of voices from D-Day, adding a discordant but essential note. The machine gunner reminds us that even necessary wars exact terrible prices, that enemies remain human, that victory and defeat alike leave scars across generations. His MG-42 fell silent on June 6, 1944, but its echoes in memory, in history, in warning continue reverberating. We end where we began, with a German machine gunner watching American soldiers wade through chest-deep water toward his position. In those moments before opening fire, infinite possibilities existed: mercy, communication, shared humanity. Instead, training and duty asserted themselves. The trigger was pulled. History unfolded in blood and fire. Young men died for causes they imperfectly understood, following orders from leaders they'd never meet, creating trauma that would echo through generations. That's the view from WN-72. Not heroism or villainy, but tragedy. The recurring human tragedy of war that each generation must confront anew. Novak's account ensures we see D-Day not just through the eyes of victorious liberators, but also through the sights of a German machine gun, a perspective that complicates, enriches, and ultimately deepens our understanding of June 6, 1944, and war itself. The last word belongs to Novak himself, whose sparse prose carries more weight than any analysis. So the carnage restarted. In those 4 words lie war's essence, not glory or honor, but carnage, mechanical and repetitive, restarting with each wave of young men sent into the killing zone. Aftermath, the unfinished account. Novak's memoir breaks off abruptly, leaving readers to wonder about the final hours of 72's defense. Historical records fill in what his account omits. By early afternoon on June 6th, American forces had infiltrated the bluffs at multiple points. Naval gunfire systematically reduced German strongpoints. Small groups of Rangers and infantry worked their way behind defensive positions. WN-72 likely held out until late afternoon when flanking movements made its position untenable. Standard German defensive doctrine called for strong points to fight until overrun, buying time for mobile reserves to counterattack. But no reserves came. They were held back by Hitler's conviction that Normandy was a feint, the real invasion still to come at Pas-de-Calais. We don't know Novak's fate. He may have died at his gun, killed by naval shell fire or infantry assault. He might have surrendered when ammunition ran out and American troops appeared behind his position. Perhaps he survived, joined the retreat inland, and lived to write his brief memoir years later. The historical record remains silent on individual fates among Omaha's defenders. The reckoning, counting the cost. When the guns finally fell silent on Omaha Beach, the scale of carnage became apparent. The beach that Novak described as full of bodies told only part of the story. Official casualty figures vary, but most historians accept approximately. American losses on D-Day at Omaha: 2,400 killed, wounded, or missing. Heaviest losses in first wave units. Company A, 116th Infantry, 91% casualties. Company E, 116th Infantry, 80% casualties. Company F, 116th Infantry, 90% casualties. Engineers and special units, 40 to 60% casualties. German losses, 1,200, 1,500 killed, wounded, or captured at Omaha Sector, WN strongpoints, fought until overrun. 352nd Infantry Division effectively destroyed within days. 716th Static Division ceased to exist as organized unit. These numbers tell a story of asymmetric slaughter becoming eventual Allied victory through sheer determination and material superiority. The strategic impact. Despite the carnage Novak inflicted and witnessed, Omaha Beach was held by nightfall on June 6th. The Allies had achieved their foothold, though at far greater cost than anticipated. Within weeks, the breakout from Normandy would doom German forces in France. Yet the near disaster at Omaha carried strategic implications. Respect for defense. Allied planners gained new respect for prepared defenses, influencing subsequent operations. Combined, arms emphasis, the failure of unsupported infantry assault, reinforced needs for integrated fire support, intelligence priority. Missing the 352nd Division's presence highlighted intelligence gathering's critical importance. Tactical adaptation. Rigid plan adherence nearly proved fatal. Flexibility became paramount in training. Personal legacies for the survivors. Americans who survived Omaha Beach carried physical and psychological wounds for decades. Many couldn't speak of their experiences for years. When they did, common themes emerged: survivor guilt over fallen comrades, recurring nightmares of machine gun fire, inability to forget the beach's smell, cordite, blood, death, complicated feelings about German opponents. One survivor, reflecting decades later, noted, "We hated them that day, had to hate them to do what needed doing. But later, you realize they were young men like us, doing what they were told, the waste of it all. For the defenders, German veterans of Normandy faced different burdens. Unlike their American counterparts, they couldn't frame their service within liberation narratives. They had defended an evil regime, however professionally they fought. Many maintained the clean Wehrmacht myth, that they were simple soldiers, not complicit in Nazi crimes. Yet memoirs like Novak's complicate this narrative. He expresses no Nazi ideology, focuses purely on tactical matters, even sympathizes with his victims. But he still manned his gun, still followed orders, still enabled a criminal regime's continuation. This tension, professional soldier versus moral complicity, haunted German veterans. Historical perspectives, the American narrative. In American memory, Omaha Beach became Bloody Omaha, the day's hardest fight, where citizen soldiers overcame professional defenders through courage and determination. Films like Saving Private Ryan crystallized this narrative: chaos, carnage, eventual triumph through individual initiative. This narrative serves important purposes, honors genuine sacrifice and courage, provides meaning for terrible losses, reinforces American military values, initiative, adaptation, determination, justifies the war's necessity. Yet it can also obscure complexities, the near failure, the intelligence lapses, the terrible arithmetic of attrition, warfare. The German perspective. German military histories long portrayed Normandy as a lost victory, betrayed by Hitler's interference, overwhelmed by material superiority, defeated by circumstances rather than military failure. This narrative allowed professional pride while distancing from Nazi ideology. Accounts like Novak's support yet complicate this view. Yes, German defenders fought skillfully with inferior resources, but they fought to preserve a genocidal regime. Technical proficiency cannot be separated from moral context. Modern German historiography increasingly acknowledges this complexity, examining how professional military excellence served criminal ends. The machine gunner performing his duty enabled the Holocaust's continuation, whether he recognized it or not. The French context. Often overlooked in Anglo-American narratives, French civilians paid heavily for liberation. The fishing villages behind Omaha Beach, Vierville, Saint Laurent, Colleville, were devastated. Families who had endured 4 years of occupation now faced bombardment, combat, and displacement. French memory of D-Day encompasses gratitude for liberation, tempered by recognition of its costs. The Norman countryside bears scars, abandoned bunkers, military cemeteries, rebuilt villages that testify to liberation's price. Lessons learned and unlearned. Military evolution. Omaha Beach's lessons influenced military doctrine for decades. Fire support integration. Modern military operations emphasize overwhelming fire support before committing infantry. The failure of D-Day's preliminary bombardment taught that hope is not a planning factor. Intelligence fusion. Missing the 352nd Division's presence demonstrated intelligence's critical importance. Modern militaries invest heavily in reconnaissance, signals intelligence, and analysis fusion. Tactical flexibility. Omaha showed that rigid plan adherence in fluid situations courts disaster. Modern training emphasizes initiative, adaptation, and mission-type orders. Logistics focus. The battle for the beach was won partly through superior sustainment, continuous reinforcement despite losses. Modern militaries recognize logistics as operations foundation. Forgotten lessons. Yet, each generation must relearn certain truths. Geography matters. Despite technological advances, terrain still channels operations. Afghanistan's mountains and Iraq's cities proved as challenging as Normandy's bocage. Will counts. Superior technology cannot guarantee victory against determined defenders. Vietnam, Afghanistan, and other conflicts demonstrated will's importance versus capability. Casualties. Shock. Modern societies struggle accepting casualties that World War II forces considered routine. Political will evaporates when losses mount, regardless of strategic merit. War's friction. Clausewitz's concept of friction, the gap between plans and reality, manifested at Omaha and continues plaguing military operations. The moral dimension. Just war considerations. Novak's account forces confrontation with just war theory's complexities. The Allied cause was undeniably just, defeating Nazi tyranny, ending the Holocaust, liberating conquered peoples. Yet the means involved sending waves of young men into machine gun fire, accepting terrible casualties as operational costs. Does the cause's justice validate the means' horror? Can military necessity excuse the mechanical slaughter Novak describes? These questions have no easy answers, but demand consideration. Individual responsibility. Where does individual moral responsibility lie in industrialized warfare? Novak pulled the trigger, but he didn't start the war, design the Atlantic Wall, or order the defense. He was a small cog in a vast machine, yet every trigger pull was a moral choice, however constrained by circumstances. This question resonates today as military technology increases killing's distance and abstraction. Drone operators, cyber warriors, and others face similar moral challenges, following lawful orders that nonetheless result in death. The enemy's humanity. Perhaps Novak's memoir's greatest value lies in humanizing the enemy. It's easier to accept killing faceless evil opponents than recognizing them as young men equally trapped by history. His sympathy for American soldiers, even while killing them, forces recognition of shared humanity. This recognition doesn't excuse service to evil, but demands nuanced understanding. Binary good-evil narratives comfort but oversimplify. Reality involves human beings on all sides, making imperfect choices in impossible circumstances. Contemporary relevance, urban warfare, parallels. Modern urban warfare eerily echoes Omaha Beach dynamics. Defenders in prepared positions with elevation advantage. Attackers channeled into kill zones. Civilians caught between combatants. Technology advantage negated by terrain. Individual courage insufficient against integrated defenses. From Grozny to Fallujah to Mosul, attacking forces rediscover Omaha's lessons that determined defenders in prepared positions exact terrible tolls. Amphibious operations. Despite predictions of obsolescence, amphibious operations remain relevant. Taiwan contingencies island disputes, and littoral warfare keep D-Day's lessons current. Modern technology changes tools, but not principles. Intelligence drives planning. Fire support enables maneuver. Logistics determine sustainability. Geography shapes operations. Will matters as much as capability. Moral injury. Modern understanding of moral injury. Psychological damage from participating in events violating moral beliefs helps interpret accounts like Novak's. His expression of feeling bad for these guys while continuing to kill them exemplifies moral injury's essence. Veterans from all conflicts report similar experiences, doing necessary things that nonetheless violate personal ethics. Society asks soldiers to kill while maintaining moral sensibility, creating inevitable tension. Novak's brief account captures this universal military trauma. Memorialization and meaning. Physical memorials. Today, BUN-72's remains are preserved as part of the Omaha Beach memorial landscape. Concrete bunkers, worn by weather but still imposing, allow visitors to peer through the same embrasures where Novak's MG-42 delivered death. Information panels describe the defense without glorifying it. The American Cemetery above Omaha contains 9,387 graves, each marking an individual tragedy. The German cemetery at Le Combe holds 21,222 burials, often in mass graves. Both represent war's human cost, though interpreted differently. Living memory. As World War II veterans pass away, preserving their accounts becomes critical. Memoirs like Novak's, however brief and problematic, provide irreplaceable perspectives. They complicate comfortable narratives, but enhance understanding. The challenge lies in preserving memory while learning appropriate lessons. Novak's technical proficiency shouldn't be admired without acknowledging its service to evil. American courage shouldn't obscure poor planning and intelligence failures. Complexity serves truth better than simplification. Universal messages. Ultimately, accounts from all sides converge on common themes. War's horror transcends causes. Individual soldiers rarely choose their wars. Courage exists on all sides. Technology enables, but doesn't sanitize killing. Victory and defeat alike leave lasting scars. These universals argue for exhausting alternatives before accepting war's necessity. Final reflections. The view from WN-72. Standing where Novak's machine gun position once dominated Omaha Beach, modern visitors struggle reconciling pastoral beauty with historical horror. The beach stretches peacefully. Families play where soldiers died. Sailboats dot waters that ran red with blood. This transformation from killing ground to tourist destination reflects time's healing, but also memory's fragility. Without accounts like Novak's, we might forget what happened here. Not abstract history, but individual young men killing and dying for causes they imperfectly understood. Novak's memoir, fragmentary and troubling, ensures one small piece of June 6, 1944, remains accessible to human understanding. Through his MG-42 sights, we see American soldiers not as Hollywood heroes, but as vulnerable human beings advancing into industrial death. This perspective doesn't diminish their sacrifice, but adds dimension. The German machine gunner, watching American soldiers through his gun sight, feeling sympathy while fulfilling duty, represents war's essential tragedy: decent people forced by history into indecent acts. Neither monster nor hero, Novak embodies the moral complexity of ordinary participants in extraordinary events. His account warns against war's seductive simplifications: us versus them, good versus evil, victory versus defeat. Reality involves human beings on all sides, suffering and inflicting suffering, following orders they didn't write toward ends they couldn't foresee. Conclusion echoes across time. Heinrich Novak's brief memoir ends where it began, with young men advancing through water toward machine guns. Between those bookends lies concentrated horror: the mechanical efficiency of modern killing, the waste of human potential, the reduction of individuals to targets and casualties. Yet, within that horror, humanity persists. Novak worries about his weapon but also feels for his victims. His assistant questions the slaughter's morality. Even in extremis, moral sense survives, creating the tension that defines modern warfare: how to kill efficiently while remaining human. The parallel between Novak at Omaha and his father at the Somme suggests war's recurring patterns. Each generation discovers anew that technology amplifies, but doesn't fundamentally change war's nature: organized murder, however necessary or justified. The machine gun that mowed down British infantry in 1916 and American infantry in 1944 represents continuity in mankind's capacity for self-destruction. What changes is memory and interpretation. The Somme taught the wrong lessons: tactical adjustments rather than war's futility. Omaha Beach risks similar misinterpretation, celebrating victory without acknowledging its costs and nearness to failure. Novak's account, preserved against odds, offers different lessons. It shows war from the defender's perspective, complicating heroic narratives. It reveals killing's mechanical nature while acknowledging its moral weight. It humanizes enemies while serving as a warning about war's dehumanizing effects. Most importantly, it reminds us that behind every military history lie individual stories: the American private who never made it past the waterline, the German gunner who broke under bombardment, the French civilians caught between liberation and destruction. Each represents irreplaceable human experience, ended or forever altered by forces beyond their control. The MG-42 that Novak served achieved terrible efficiency on June 6, 1944. Its traverse across Omaha Beach created one small part of history's bloodiest day. Yet, from that efficiency emerged eventual Allied victory, Nazi defeat, and European liberation. The moral calculus remains complex. Was the slaughter necessary for the greater good, or did poor planning multiply unavoidable costs? Novak offers no answers, only his experience, watching Americans advance, feeling sympathy, pulling the trigger anyway. In that sequence lies war's essence, stripped of ideology and justification. Young men kill other young men because older men in distant capitals fail to find alternatives. Today's technology makes killing even more distant and abstract, but the moral burden remains. Somewhere, operators watch screens and press buttons, delivering death half a world away. They, like Novak, follow orders, serve causes they imperfectly understand, and struggle with sympathy for their targets. The view from WN-72 on June 6, 1944, thus speaks across decades with terrible relevance. It shows what happens when diplomacy fails, when ideology trumps humanity, when young men become instruments of historical forces. Novak's MG-42 fell silent by day's end, but its echoes continue. In those echoes lie both warning and hope. Warning that each generation faces choices between jaw and war. That today's failures become tomorrow's battlefields. Hope that by preserving accounts like Novak's, by acknowledging war's full complexity and horror, we might exhaust more alternatives before accepting its necessity. Heinrich Novak watched American soldiers advance through chest-deep water on June 6, 1944. He felt sympathy. He pulled the trigger. Young men died. History pivoted. The world changed. And one German machine gunner left a brief, troubling testament to what that change cost in human terms. That testament deserves preservation and study, not for its tactics or justifications, but for its honesty about war's reality. The mechanical traverse of machine gun fire across crowded water, bodies rolling in surf, ordinary people doing extraordinary evil in service of what they're told is good. This is war's ground truth, whether viewed from landing craft or gun position. Novak's memoir ends abruptly, like the lives it describes. But its implications continue, challenging each generation to confront war's reality rather than its romanticization. The machine gunner at Omaha Beach speaks to drone operators over Afghanistan, to planners contemplating Taiwan, to anyone who might someday watch other human beings advance into killing zones. His message transcends sides and causes. War reduces human beings to targets and shooters, corpses and survivors, statistics and memories. Sometimes it may be necessary. It is never glorious, and those who order it from safety should understand what they ask of those who execute it in harm's way. The last word belongs not to analysis, but to memory. The image of young Americans wading through blood-stained surf while a German gunner traverses his weapon, feeling bad for these guys, following orders, making history one trigger pull at a time. In that image lies June 6, 1944's essence, war's eternal truth, and humanity's recurring tragedy. May we remember, if you enjoyed the video, please like it and support the channel by subscribing. Goodbye to everyone, and we'll wait for the next time.